Good afternoon, Deputy Roy, Genesee County Sheriff's Office. Today we're going to be going over some of the applications for some of the tools that we talked about during our tactical briefing for faith-based organizations. Trauma, specifically mass hemorrhage, is the leading cause of death inside of any sort of mass casualty situation or traumatic event. We're going to give you some tools and some techniques in order to control some of that mass hemorrhage, in order to give somebody the ability to survive an incident like that. In every single one of our patrol cars, we've got emergency response kits for all of our officers. We actually have really big red bags that have 10 smaller bags inside of each of them. Inside of each of those, you'll find 10 tourniquets, 10 chest seals, and 10 trauma bandages. We use the Dynastopper or the blood stopper as our primary bandage. We found that this is a cheap, effective tool for handling these kind of situations. And obviously they're nice and compact, so it's super simple to get them into the bag. This item right here is called a chest seal. Chest seals are to treat injuries to obviously the chest, but also the back and the neck. They prevent air from entering inside of the chest cavity, which would put pressure on the heart and lungs and inhibit somebody from breathing effectively. This will stop that air from getting into there and give us the opportunity to relieve that pressure so somebody could breathe again. And then obviously everybody knows what a tourniquet is. If you don't know what a tourniquet is, I'm going to explain it. Tourniquets go on our extremities when we have a traumatic wound to any of those extremities and there is a large amount of blood coming from the wound. The tourniquet itself is made up of essentially 4 very important parts. The stick that you see on the front, this is called the windlass. You obviously have a windlass lock. There's a strap to secure the windlass in the windlass lock and note the time that the tourniquet was applied. And then obviously there's a very large strap which can be adjusted to size. It's made of Velcro. It Velcros onto itself. Stored just like this, super simple. When deploying your tourniquet, all you have to do is pull the sides like this, and you can apply it to somebody, either their arm or their leg, fairly simply. Please welcome my partner, Sergeant Hunt from Genesee County Sheriff's Office Paramedic Division. She's volunteered today to be our application dummy. So I'll be applying this tourniquet to her utilizing all these parts. Sergeant Hunt had a serious hemorrhaging injury to her left arm here. The main thing I want to make sure that I do is place it high and tight. The wound is down here. I want to place it a few inches above the wound. So what I would do is I would deploy the tourniquet like so, and I'm going to slip it over her arm. There's a red tab on the back here. I want to pull that and cinch this down as tight as possible. Once again, going high and tight, making sure that that entire band there is not twisted and that the windlass is easily accessible for me. Sorry, Sarge.
It's all good.
We're going to make sure it's high, make sure it's tight, and then we're going to take our strap and we're going to lay our strap over. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten the windlass really, really tight until the distal pulse is eliminated. Just for the sake of Sergeant Hunt's arm, we won't go too tight today, but we do want to make sure that the windlass is locked in place and the time that we applied it is noted on there if safe to do so. After it's applied and hopefully the blood is stopped, I do want to reach down, feel her radial pulse, and ensure that that pulse has been eliminated and there's no more blood flow to the extremity. So that's one way to treat traumatic wounds to the extremities and make sure that somebody's got a chance to make it to the doctor and that they see another day. The next tool that we're going to be talking about is obviously our trauma bandage that we have here. Once again, this is called the Dynastopper or the blood stopper, depending on where you buy it from. We've got a mannequin kind of set up. We're going to pretend this is somebody's thigh or somebody's upper leg. As you can see, there's multiple wounds here. The one that we're going to talk about today is obviously this extremely large hole here, and we're going to pretend that there's arterial involvement and blood is spurting out of it. The other wounds here, because it's a training mannequin, we're just going to pretend those aren't here today and that we only have this wound. So first things first, we open up our trauma bandage here. As you can see, this trauma bandage has a large pad on it to absorb lots of blood, but it also has 2 rolls of gauze. One of them is independent of the other, and then this one is actually attached to our bleeding control pad here. When having to pack a wound, normally we pack junctional injuries, so that would be anywhere that you can't get a tourniquet, in the shoulder or in the groin specifically. When packing an injury, it's probably most important to wear gloves if they're accessible to you. Obviously, bloodborne pathogens could be an issue, but when treating family and friends, especially after an incident, that would be as traumatic as this injury here, that may be the last thing on your mind you're thinking about. When I start packing wounds, I like to keep things as clean as possible. That way I'm not introducing germs from the environment or my germs into someone else's body. So what I do is I take this first individual roll of gauze and I throw it over my shoulder like this. I get myself some slack, and then I begin at the end by wrapping the gauze around 2 fingers. I take that little ball of gauze that I wrapped around my fingers and I'm going to insert it into the wound, and I'm going to try to force my fingers towards the injury and towards the victim's heart. At that point, I would take my left hand or my other hand, my non-dominant hand, and I would fit them inside of the wound, and I would replace my left hand with my right hand, holding pressure on the ball of gauze that I just added. And then I simply rinse and repeat until the wound cavity is completely packed. The reason I use this technique is because A, it keeps everything nice and clean, but also because it expands the surface area of the gauze, and it's kind of like a bunch of really small balls packed into one giant ball in order to get as much pressure on the injury from the inside as possible. Another acceptable technique, especially if somebody's bleeding bad enough and you need to get that done in a hurry, is to take all of the gauze and ball it up next to them, and then we're literally just taking our fingers and we're feeding it into the wound as fast as possible to get as much bandaging inside of there to fill up that wound channel. I feel like this is also really good and it's super fast, but the only problem is every time you take your fingers out, a lot of that pressure that you don't initially have on there is lost until you stick your fingers back in with more gauze. Either technique is completely acceptable though, especially in a situation like this. Once we get all of the gauze inside of the wound channel, hopefully bleeding has stopped. If it hasn't, or at least slowed, then what you'll end up needing to do is get a second roll of gauze, because likely you don't have enough pressure. So once again, I would utilize the same technique. I want to unroll the gauze as much as possible. And once again, just begin packing the wound channel, pressing down into the wound cavity and up towards the patient or the victim's heart. Keep in mind, as you pack more gauze into here and the patient or victim continues to bleed, a lot of this gauze will be expanding inside because it'll be absorbing a lot of the blood, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because your red blood cells have platelets on them, and that will enable the wound to begin clotting. I am about done. After you finish packing the wound, now we're going to want to apply another bandage over the top of the wound, and we're going to want to hold firm direct pressure for approximately 3 to 5 minutes, at least 3 minutes, but 3 to 5 is generally accepted. Once again, that'll give your red blood cells and the platelets on those red blood cells time and the ability to clot over, hopefully stopping the bleeding. So the last tool we're going to talk about is the chest seal. We place chest seals on the chest, the back, and the neck to prevent air from entering somewhere that it doesn't need to enter. It also helps us with stopping bleeding and treating the wounds to those areas. This is a single chest seal. They normally come in 2 packs. The ones that come in 2 packs come with a vented side and a non-vented side. Generally, most often, the vented side goes on the front or the chest of the patient because it won't be occluded when the patient's laying down. It'll allow any extra air inside to escape, but it won't allow air to be pulled into the chest cavity and disturb the equilibrium inside of the chest. Most of them also come with a piece of gauze, a small 4x4 like this. This enables us to wipe away any excess blood from the area we're applying it to, so the chest seal sticks to the chest. There's a handy dandy red tab on here, just like there is on your tourniquets. All we're gonna do is we're gonna pull the chest seal away from the plastic. You'll have a sticky side and a not sticky side. After wiping away the wound, we're just going to apply the chest seal to the wound, which is likely going to be in the chest or the back, and we're going to make sure it sticks all the way down. Pretty simple, but a super, super effective tool to treat those types of injuries. One thing I will talk about is anytime somebody has a gunshot wound or a stab wound to the chest, the back, or anywhere on the body, everybody talks about entry points and exit points. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if there's a hole somewhere there shouldn't be a hole and it's bleeding. You should always expect a second hole somewhere else. So after you apply your first chest seal, always do a secondary sweep, checking the patient or the victim for a second injury. So depending on the size of the congregation at your place of worship, you should probably have anywhere from 1 to every 10 people that you may need to treat. I would argue that maybe 1 to every 7 people would be a little bit more sustainable, because you got to remember, if it's 1 to every 10 people, some victims may require more than one of these tools to control that mass hemorrhage. So I would say 1 emergency kit to approximately 7 to 10 people is likely enough. A lot of these resources can be purchased from Boundtree Medical Supplier. They're our main point of purchase for the supplies that we use while we're out on the road. If you have any questions, you can reach out to them. They've got reps available 24/7 who can walk you through these tools a little bit more and give you a price point. So there really is no difference between emergency response kit and a basic first aid kit. The only difference is that your emergency response kits are more built for a mass casualty situation. So it's a large number of tools and medical supplies to treat a large number of people. That's what I would call an emergency response kit.